Welcome to the Beyond the Bestseller podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Shupnak, and today's guest is Charisse Walker, author of Flipping the Iceberg. Hi, Charisse.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Thanks for coming on to talk about your book. I like to just start out by having you tell us about your book and why you wrote it.
Well, my book is, I basically the tagline really should have said, Save your marriage, two secrets before saying I do, because it really is. There's two parts to the book, and the first one is healing yourself so you can make a good decision. The second one is now that you've healed yourself, then you need to get to know your partner that you think that you're in love with. Because an iceberg, 10% of it is above the water, 90% is below the water. So if you can flip the iceberg and get to know as much as you can about not only your own traumas and issues that are affecting your relationship, but knowing that there is somebody behind the mask that you think you love. And those are the two things. And hopefully by the end, you decide, because there's a workbook that accompanies it, that you decide, no, we still do love each other. We do want this to work. And you walk into marriage prepared, at least having most of those hard conversations addressed before oh, we're in love with each other. 3 months later, we get married. And then, I don't know, we bring kids into the world. 8 years later is typically the kind of threshold, or 15 years people get divorced, and then a whole bunch of lives are uprooted. So I wrote the book to save marriages.
Wow. Did you say that like divorces usually happen 8 to 15 years after?
So there's a benchmark. It's 8 years right now. And then the next time, if you can make it work, then 15 years. But the number one population of people getting divorced right now, the most, are 65 and older, believe it or not.
Really?
The number one age group right now.
Well, they had to have uncovered the iceberg by that point, right? Or is that like second marriages?
So back then, right, so long ago, you had people that got married because getting married at a young age was the thing to do. And so then right after that, the other thing to do is that you then had kids. So then the culture is we stay together for the kids. Well, guess what? Now these kids are moving on and people are now retiring. And now they're home with each other, realizing I didn't like you all these years. I don't like you now, and I don't want to be with you anymore. That is a huge population that they've grown apart from each other. They just didn't want to be together, and they just tried to make it work for as long as they could and decided it's time to live their second life.
Okay. When you were talking about your book, I was thinking of like, I don't know if my sister listens to my podcast, but I have to like, I remember I have an older sister, right? And I feel like my sister made not all of the mistakes, but like I saw like her, when she got married,
Yep.
how, and they're still together and they're great, right? But like at the time,
Hmm.
she was 19 and
Hmm.
he was, I don't know, 21 or something.
Right.
Right. And they got married and they were, in my opinion now, like way too young to be getting married. I was 16 at the time. Like, I didn't really know any different. But anyway, I remember like her stories of how they would like fight so much those first few months, years, whatever, like learning to live together. And so I think I went into marriage like expecting that it's going to be like really like,
Mhm.
there's going to be all this conflict at the beginning, and I didn't experience that. But I wonder if some of that is like I don't know if it's like the age, if it's the, you're going through, right? Like you're in that honeymoon stage or whatever, like you are so in love that you're like blind to the what's under the iceberg, right? And
Mhm.
you're under the surface, right? And yeah, and then those things start to come out. And I think some of it's like, learning to live together and all of that too. But anyways, I was like thinking that was like what I was picturing in my mind. And I don't know how common that is, or if that was just my sister's relationship.
Yeah. No, I think it really does depend. And getting young, because I got married when I was 19 as well, the first time. The reason I wrote is because we did end up getting divorced. I actually heard, I was kneeling across the altar and I heard a voice say, Charisse, get up and run. It's clear as day. It was a man's voice. And I looked around and I saw my dad because I kind of thought it was my dad. And he was sitting over on the other side of the room just smiling. And I'm like, okay. Clearly, I'm not supposed to marry this person, but I did anyway. And I tried to make it work for 15 years. And I had the opposite effect of you is when we got married in Virginia. We were going to school in Utah. We were driving across country. And I remember we fought every single day in that car. And I'm like, oh, we have a great marriage. This is just wonderful because I never saw my parents fight. I didn't know any of that. And so I think that, I mean, it's good that you went in probably with your blinders off that you're expecting for fights. And so then you're like, not maybe, but I think it really does vary for everyone. And I truly do think that your childhood has a huge impact on how you, your perception and everything. And if you don't deal with
Hmm.
some of that trauma that sometimes you encounter, then I call it the iceberg that literally just sits in the water waiting for your relationship to run into it and get sunk. And so that's something where, like I said, had they had some of those conversations, worked through a lot of the questions that I have in my workbook, it would have been interesting. A lot of those things that they were fighting about, they probably would have addressed before. And so it
Hmm.
might have been a little bit easier transition.
Well, I've also learned as I've gotten older too, like in the workplace, I've done like the personality
Hmm.
tests, or I don't know if they're called personality tests, but like those tests that you do in the workplace to like figure out how you work together, right? One of the things I'm very familiar with is the DISC
Yeah.
assessment. Those different like personality types, when you get them together, can be conflicting, right? And there's those people who have like those really strong personalities and things have to be their way. I tend to be like more laid back in my relationship, not in all facets of my life, right? But I'm kind of like, okay. And my husband tends to be like that more dominant personality, but like I'm just like, oh, okay, like whatever, right? But if you're gonna be the type of personality that's like conflicting with that, then I think that's where things can go wrong. But like those things you don't understand when you're 19, right? Like you don't understand that when you're 20, early
Well,
20s.
and birth order is a huge,
Yes,
and,
also,
and
yes.
I talk about that in my book. And
I'm gonna I
I'll
have
go
to tell my sister, like, don't listen to this one, but also she's an oldest child, which I think
and that's something
often
that's
tends to be a dominant personality.
Mhm. Yeah, unless there's two, like I teach about the birth order, but if there's two, like say that you were 2 years apart from your sister and she didn't prove worthy to be the firstborn, then you would take over those characteristics and then she would become more of the opposite of you. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, it's very interesting. I talk about that in the book is you have the chief enabler and then you have like there's different roles. And so I give descriptions of each one and I say, hey, which one sounds like you? Because you even have like the little class clown type person, usually the youngest. But there's reasons why people are the way they are for real because of their birth order. And um,
Yeah.
I have a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old. And so my 11-year-old the other day goes, Mom, how come there's so many pictures of Melinda, who's the baby? And I'm like, there's a lot of pictures of you too. But it's just, it's interesting because that they're forgotten because all of a sudden now you have this other newborn baby that you're trying to take care of. Yeah, very interesting. You just had to say
Yeah.
born. And I'm like, yeah, I could tell you all about her then.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, I think that it's funny too. I have like this, I don't know why this is a core memory for me, but my sister and I were tennis players. And I remember when we were young, like in tennis lessons, that one of our coaches had mentioned something about birth order. And I had to have been like probably we were probably like your kids' ages at the time. Like we were very young. But that always stuck with me. And I remember like he had just made some comment about one or the other of us and like something with our birth order. But it like stuck with me. And I remember always thinking that as I was getting older and learning, just as I was getting to know people, it's like, oh, okay, like you're a youngest, you're an oldest, you're this, and like being able to like put that together because it's so true. It really impacts people. And I know there's all these different things that can happen in your family with whatever, but like
There is.
oldest personalities tend to have certain traits, and I'm a middle child, but I'm not like middle or youngest because my brother was 8 years after me, and I think that's like the cutoff for like I'm not considered a middle and he's not considered a youngest, he's considered an only. Sorry, we're taking like a whole tangent with this
I know, but it's
conversation,
fascinating.
but it's
My daughter was
fascinating.
dating this guy during Christmas, and we met him over Christmas. She brought him home, and we ended up getting to this 2-hour conversation about the birth order. He was thoroughly enthralled. And I'm
Yes.
like, oh, I could totally tell you the personalities. He's like, like I've never even met him. I can tell you.
Yeah.
And so it's very interesting. But also, you made a comment before that you said because I've watched my sister, so this is how I think it should be. I have two older sisters, love them dearly. One of them said if I ever talked about her that she would kill me. I have to be very careful about what I say anyway. So if I ever talked about her, the name has been completely changed, maybe even the gender, because nobody can know, right? So anyway, I would watch my sisters, good or bad, and I'd be like, I'm not going to do that. And so they were the best examples of what not to do growing up. And it's just birth order is very interesting and it really does affect your relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. So you do cover, you talk about that in your book. That's really interesting. And then you talked about the different, I forget how you called it, like the different personality types that like the enablers was one that you specifically mentioned. So what are the different personality types? Like how many are there that you cover?
There's five. And
Okay.
I, I have stayed up because you're going to ask me, and I'm like, I see the whole table and I'm totally blinking right now. So I'm super embarrassed. I should have had it totally next to me.
No, that's okay. I just wondered if they went along with like disc or like something where they're like similar. No.
No, it strictly is more the birth order and the names for
Oh,
that are like that.
okay.
So, yeah, I actually the Color Code by Taylor Hartman. I'm sure it's in like right there actually.
Okay.
I swear by that. And honestly, I stayed married with my first husband for as long as I did because I understood his personality and I'm like, okay, well, this is the way he is. He's a yellow, I was a blue, and he was the youngest. And so I just those things really do affect. And if you can try, like I really did try to make that marriage work a lot. And at the end of the day, I mean, I was dying, literally. I would probably not be here today because of the issues that I was having because of the stress. And so
Mhm.
um, that's something that is so real. And I think it's just underplayed so much and it has to be discussed. And that could be the
Hmm.
trauma. Like you were the forgotten child. And so you might not have as close a relationship with your family in terms of like hanging out with them. You'd rather hang out with people outside of your family or groups because um, that's just the way you were. So you might tend to gravitate and hold on to your husband because that's your out of the family, whereas somebody else would like cling to the family. So it's just
Oh.
very interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. I love that stuff. Sounds like your book would be really interesting to read. So tell me about like you have your marriage story that didn't go well and ended up divorced. What led you to write the book? Like what at what point were you like, I need to write this story?
Great question. My daughter was 10 and well, actually, I take that back. She was 12 and we were in a house. I was like cutting carrots and she was sitting at the bar in the island, and then I was making dinner. And so we were having this conversation and I will ruin in the story. I didn't really say who it was, but clearly you could probably tell it was my ex-husband. And so she came in because he was supposed to pick her up from something and he like canceled on her. And she was looking forward to it. And so she's like, Mom, why is it that he always cancels on us, but yet he won't ever drop anything for his friends? And so, for example, like I have full custody, and I would have them pretty much all the time. Like he really didn't come. He never spent any week during the week together or anything. And I really did, but the once in a while, because he lived with his parents, he would take them, but he would go to a party. And so if they didn't want to come, they'd stay home with his parents and their grandparents. It was sad to me. It was just not a priority. That's okay. That's him. I knew that, but it was hard for me to see how heartbroken she was. And
Mm.
so I just said to her, I said, sweetie, she goes, to everybody else, they all love him. He can walk into a room and he's the life of the party. He has this great thing. But to me and to like people that really know him, he's not that person. And I said, sweetie, I want you to think of it. It's kind of like an iceberg. And what you see above the water is all people see. Once you get below it, it's a different story. And my husband and I are ex, we have a great relationship. And I tell him, so this isn't something new that I would talk behind his back. I said, but we have a great relationship as long as it stays on the surface. And we do. He's a fun guy. We still have conversations with each other back and forth. My husband gets upset because we're good friends, but um,
Hmm.
it's just when you get, and that's the facade that's so often, like my own grandma, she's like, Charisse, why would you let him go? If you would just quit your job, he would step up. And I'm like, Grandma, if I quit my job, we would be homeless. And she didn't believe
Hmm.
that. And so finally, when we did split, it was probably a year and a half later, she came to me, she goes, Charisse, I'm sorry. And I said, why? And she goes, I didn't know. Sorry. And I didn't think that that was going to get me. That happened with neighbors. That happened with like, there's so many people. I was the bad person, and you can't say
Yeah,
anything. He's 50% of my kids, so
right.
it was really hard. And so that's where I'm like, and with my second husband, we dated each other for a year, And still 6 weeks into the marriage, like I'm like, marriage is bliss. And then the bottom dropped out on some stuff. And we were able to like work through everything, but it's just really hard. And had we asked those hard questions that I now know, and that I've like quite frankly gone through with my current husband, that's we're still together almost as long as the first. And so it's just I want every single person that is contemplating marriage or that is in a marriage that you're in a loveless marriage or you're roommates. You're not really a marriage because that is a big thing right now too, is you're just roommates, you're cohabitating that get back together. Like it can be a wonderful thing. And I talk about summiting the iceberg, like climb the mountain, flip the iceberg, climb it together. And that view, if you've ever like stood over the high peak of some mountain and you've looked over, it's a beautiful view. And that could be your marriage. Like it is possible if you're willing to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, my soapbox.
No, it's okay. So do you feel then that like I guess we talked about like the personality types. I can't remember like whatever you call those, right? Like, do you think that like getting to understand those things it is what allows you to see past like is that kind of part of the message there? Because like in the workplace, like the disc profiles do help you see that like somebody else who is driving you crazy, like those things that are like totally making you nuts at work are often just different work styles. And it's like that person isn't trying to piss you off or like frustrate you or whatever. It's like they just work differently. They see things differently. And it still might drive you nuts going forward, but like the things that you start to understand, like that why they do the things they do, or how they are, like it helps you take kind of the emotion out of it and take the, and see like just what's happening there. And so you understand, oh, well, he's asking me to do this because this is where he's coming from. And, so is that similar, like in understanding that, are you able to then kind of see the behaviors separate from the emotions like that are happening because of those behaviors?
I think so. I think the way that I wrote the book, it honestly should be two books. And quite frankly, I'm trying to decide if I'm going to split it because the first part, you have to know yourself. Like a marriage can be 50-50 in terms of two people are there, but it's not. I talk about a roller coaster that sometimes I'm up, sometimes he's down, and it's vice versa. But as long as
Yep.
two people are willing to work, but we can't even talk about that relationship until we talk about your own personal relationship. If you don't love yourself, like I used to be incredibly codependent. There's things that happened in my childhood that I didn't even realize until I was, I think, in seventh grade. And then I remembered things that I wish I wouldn't have. And so it's just that type of stuff. You have trust issues, you have different things that happen. And so because of that, you're not healthy. You're not able to make decisions. And quite frankly, you might be completely oblivious and unaware. Flipping the iceberg is an acronym. So flipping is part one, and that talks about how to find yourself, how to deal with intuition, how to escape from pressure, like maybe pressure from your family, pressure from your culture, pressure from religion, pressure from friends. It doesn't matter. Flipping, there's a word for each one of those things. And so it takes you through the journey for yourself first. And once you feel like, okay, I'm healed and I'm thinking clearly and I'm ready to get into a relationship or I'm ready to have a serious relationship, now it turns to let's now go through. I'm assuming that you have a relationship that you're in and it's getting pretty serious. So let's now, the acronym is the iceberg, and that's for your partner and you. So there's a whole, like I used to be a teacher in college and then I directed a lot of colleges. So I'm all about active learning. I don't want you to just read it. I want you to do it. And so it'll say, now go to your workbook and here's the questions you need to answer. And so I expect the reader to do work. They're not going to just read it because it's not going to stick with them. So it's
Mhm.
almost like well, it is. It's a journal that they can then go through together or separately. And at the end, it's like, do I really want to be with you? And the other one is, do I want to be with you? And you're asking each other questions. And so it's great date night stuff. Instead of watching TV, instead of playing on your phones, like, hey, and I do this with my husband right now. And he's like, okay, I'm ready. And some things you're not going to agree with, but wouldn't you rather have that known now than when you get married? And then how are we going to
Right.
discipline these kids? And I don't agree with this, and I don't agree with that. And then now what do we do? How do we discipline them? Because we don't agree.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
money's a huge thing too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So who is your book best for? Is it that person who is dating before they get married? Is it for the person who is struggling in their relationship? Like at what, or is it all of the above? Like where is it best, the best fit for somebody in their journey?
So originally when I wrote this book, it was for like I have kids that are my first four from the first husband. It's 18 to 24. I have twins that are 20, well, actually 25 now. And
I'm glad you're
so
clarifying this because you've mentioned your kids a couple times and the ages have thrown me off. Okay, so there's a lot of kids. Okay.
I have six. So,
Okay,
but from the first husband, I had four, and then my second husband, we have two.
got
And
it.
so, anyway, wrote it as if I was writing it for them so that they can go through this process with them. However, I
Mm,
also wrote it because if I'm divorced, I wish would have had this guide or this manual to be able to go through with my current husband. And so it could be for those two. With that said, I have a lot of people that have purchased it that are currently in their own marriages and have been for a long time. They're like, wow, Charisse, this has really helped me. And so I am writing a second book. It's called Flipping the Iceberg. We're married, now what? And so it's going to go through it. Like if you're a newlywed, like, oh my gosh, it's kind of like your sister. How do we
yeah.
get through it? And then like all the ages. So there's going to be different sections. So you could essentially not read the whole book. You could just read that for that section. So anyway, that's the second. But
Got
in my
it.
opinion, anybody who's married or contemplating marriage could read it. But I wrote it for those two purposes in mind.
Okay. So you're writing the second one now. Uh, how long? I have to ask you this because you had a reaction before we started recording when I mentioned talking about your writing process. How long did it take you to write the first one?
2 years.
Okay,
From the
that's
time
not
that we
bad.
started. Well, my coach, she said, Sharice, you're going to need to get a counselor. And I'm like, what? And she goes, if you're going to write about trauma and about your past, you're
Hmm.
going to need to get a counselor. And I'm like, I'll be fine. So I was writing it, and all of a sudden, I just, it was hard. Emotionally, it was hard. So I had to take actually 6 months off and deal, oh my gosh, all this stuff with stuff because you don't know until you start writing it and coming to terms with stuff. Again, it's like, oh, I dealt with that, but it's still that emotion comes back sometimes. And so it actually was really, really healing. So I don't know why I'm crying. I think it's just because of that journey that I've gone through.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
really healing. And so, um, but yeah, if you're writing something, especially you have a story, then I would highly recommend that you probably do get someone that you can talk to because
That's a great tip. I have an author power circle for women who are writing their books, and we've never talked about that before, but I think that's a great thing for me to bring to the group is just the recommendation because a lot of them are writing stories that are maybe not necessarily traumatic, but they're whatever. Like there's a message they have
Mhm.
because of their journey, and so it may include some traumatic experiences or whatever. So that's a really great, I think that's a really great tip that that person gave you.
Take the advice though too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, 2 years is not bad though at all. I think that's, I mean, it probably felt like forever when you were doing it, but I think that's great. I mean, it wasn't like it took you a decade to write it, but what do you think on this second book that you're writing? What do you anticipate? Do you think it'll be a shorter process because you already have kind of the first foundational book, or you're laughing?
I
Maybe
am
not.
because, well, I remember there were times where my husband would come in and he'd say something or do something, and I'm like, and I'd type like, and don't do this and don't do this. And I realized as I read through it, I was at 75,000 words for my first book. And then my coach, they're like, we only coach 60,000. And in any word after that, 7 cents a word. So do the math, there's like 1,100 or 1,400 more dollars I would have had to pay for them to help. I'm like, I'll cut it. And as I was going through, she's like, well, you wrote it for yourself. Now write it for the reader. And so I said, oh, okay, that's cool. And then I started realizing a lot of this stuff had to do with marriage, had nothing to do with if you're dating or if you're, and so I took a
Hmm.
lot out, created this deleted sections file. So I have a
Oh,
lot
yeah.
already written. And I didn't do this to begin with as well, is start with an outline, a table of contents. Like, hello, that's 101 of writing, right? And I didn't do that. I just started writing. And then I had to, like, there was chapters, and then, so am I going to use the analogy of the flipping and then the iceberg, like, as an acronym? Is that too long? There's a lot of things I'd probably do differently, but the second one now, it's not going to take that long because I think half of it's already written.
Nice. Well, I will link to Flipping the Iceberg in the show notes. Is there any other way that listeners can learn more about what you're doing, get in touch with you? What other resources can we provide for them?
Yeah, so I actually am offering if they, and Flipping'sburg, I'm changing the website actually this weekend. And so it'll be a little different. So please be patient. But if you're interested, I would be more than happy to send you the ebook of the workbook as free. I am going to be selling it soon when it's published, but I would love feedback and I'd love people to go through it because there's quite a few questions and it's like, do you cut them down? Do you not? But I think, again, for every person, it's different. And so don't answer all the questions. That's okay. Just answer the ones that pertain to you, but yours are going to be different than somebody else's. So I've decided it's a pretty lengthy work. So I can send it to you ebook for free for those people that go to my website and ask for that.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Charisse. Thanks for putting this book out into the world. I know that this is a great resource for a lot of people. And it was a lot of hard work to write the book, right? But like I meant like hard work dealing with your own stuff to be able to put something like this together and using those experiences. I think it's amazing that you were able to work through all of that and put together this resource for other women. So thank you for coming on and sharing your story.
Thank you for having me.
Looking for a community of women writers to support and inspire you on your journey? Join the Author Power Circle. Connect weekly with fellow authors, stay accountable, and move your book forward in an encouraging community. Learn more at kellyshuckneck.com.